I would like to speak for a few minutes and then invite Craig Laffin to speak about the person which I'm going to talk about now. And the centre figure in the portfolio of 3 photographs there is an Australian Army Nursing Service sister. Her name is Nellie Alfreda Pike. And Nell, I think, and you used another term to describe her.
Gar, which is Scottish for grandmother.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I called her.
Now that photograph of her is taken during the war, but superimposed on it are the medal ribbons that she was subsequently awarded after the war. So that is a composite photograph, and I'm going to show you some rarely seen photographs of her war service, which were gratefully supplied by Craig and Sue Tung, another descendant of Nellie, in a presentation they gave here last year. Nellie was served in the Gallipoli Theatre at Lemnos in Egypt, and subsequently in France and the United Kingdom in a variety of mainly Australian but also British hospitals. Now, when I became a member of the Gallipoli Association, I learnt from a fellow member that there was an Australian woman who became the first woman member of the Gallipoli Association sometime just after its founding. Now, I found this very interesting, and I attempted some research. That research was assisted by the editor of the Gallipolian journal, and also by the Australian digital officer, both of which are Australians living at opposite ends of the country. And I discovered that Nell had been appointed to the Gallipoli Association in 1979 upon the nomination of her son, John Laffin, the military historian, and that he applied for associate membership as he was not a veteran of Gallipoli. When I found that his number began with the letter A, signifying associate, I suddenly realised that Nell's membership number had an A, as though she was an associate member and not a full member or a veteran member. So I looked into this matter and discovered that the then president of the Gallipoli Association had not, the Gallipoli Association had not considered the formal status of women as veterans because they were on hospital ships or in hospitals in Egypt, but of course they were also at Lemnos. So in 1979, Nell became the first woman member of the Gallipoli Association. I thought that wasn't good enough. Did she subsequently be recognised? Well, within a few years, it became apparent that the issue had assumed some importance within the society, and it was accepted that as a nurse, she was a veteran and full member. But has it ever been fully recognised or confirmed? There's little knowledge about this. I wrote this article. You can see that I used the photograph of Nellie there, and that's John Laffin in his prime. That's from the back of one of his many books about the period of the 1970s in which he... So when I discovered that her service was not only extensive, but also encompassed most of the First World War. And we can see that, like many, she arrived at Lemnos quite late in the campaign, but nevertheless was there. Then returned to Egypt, where she was at the 3rd Australian General Hospital. When that moved later in 1916 to England, she went there and served eventually at the 1st Australian Auxiliary Hospital at Harefield. I'm not sure, but I don't think, Craig, that her service included in France.
No.
Yeah.
No.
That is the most remarkable and well-known of Australian hospitals at Harefield in England, which remained there until being withdrawn to Australia Now, here are some photographs. She's a distinctive, small-framed woman. And now I did not see these photographs with the fellow nurse, Ruby Dickinson. Of course, that's her there. And there. It's pretty Spartan conditions. That's, I think, at Abazia, a hospital that was requisitioned and established within existing civil buildings. This is later in England. These are convalescent casualties. The most serious casualties reached Harefield. Casualties which were unlikely to return to their units. Casualties that required intensive care and love. Many of these men would have looked upon nurses like Nell as an angel, someone they could confide in. These men have lost their limbs. This is a wonderful photograph. It could very well be the basis for that colorized image. So, I was in communications with the Gallipoli Association, not through the big people, but my article was published this year, and I can tell you that Sister Nell, Elfrida, Pike, now then Laffin, is recognised as not only the first woman, but the first woman veteran and full-time member, full membership. Of course, in those days, if you married, you lost your appointment in the Australian Army Nursing Service was terminated. And here we see the marriage with Sergeant Charles Laffin and Nell Park. I think that was a relationship born in a hospital environment with treatment. I won't steal your thunder.
On Lemnos.
Yeah, that's right. So it was quite a relationship which grew and nurtured. Though this photograph is common, the annotations to it are not. Very interesting. But here's my last photograph. Now that is the now Lieutenant Laffin with his bride, in Australia after their return in 1919, and that, I think, is Nell's extended family there. I'm going to leave that photograph up there, but can I say, and Debbie, can you take this message back? I thought that the Gallipoli Association embraced this news. It was always there, but it's been rediscovered, and to have it published in the Gallipolian is a tribute to her and her family. Whether more nurses became members is debatable, because unfortunately Nell passed away within a few months of her being accepted as an associate member. She never found out that she had been granted the status of veteran or full member. We right that wrong, and I want to reinforce that with all the people I meet in the Gallipoli Association, that this is such an important part of the heritage of the group.
Can I just ask a question, Paul, please? Was that St Albans in New South Wales or Victoria?
No, that was in the UK, in England. In England.
Oh, in England. Okay, that's fine.
Now, Craig Laffin, is he? Craig, come up. Craig is a recipient of the Medal in the Order of Australia for his services to the community. While other school children spent their summer holidays at the beach, Craig, as a young boy, spent several weeks of every year with his parents, that is John Laffin and Mrs. Laffin, on the old battlefields of England and Europe. He has childhood photographs of himself, not on a beach towel, but sitting on an unexploded shell. Craig is a long-time member, a senior member of the Families and Friends of the First AIF, a long-time teacher,
Yes.
and director of development in the independent school system. Craig has inherited his late father's interest in military history, with a special place in his heart for his grandparents on the Laffin side, who served in the Great War. I invite Craig to reminisce about what he remembers of those times. And
All right. Thank you. As you would have seen from one of those photos, when she was with those wounded diggers in hospital, she was very small. She was a very small lady. She was 4'11". She was tiny, but she was power-packed. I remember her sitting down a lot because she was often, well, she became ill and frail, but she would dominate a room, absolutely dominate it. And we would all, the family, whoever was there, we would all radiate around her. I think my father found when he was growing up in the 20s to 30s that she was just as tough at home. She wasn't a noisy lady. She didn't dominate by a very loud voice, but she had this indomitable spirit. And it was that spirit that took her off into World War I. She was asked in later life why she had joined up, and she acted as if the questioner was stupid. It was obvious to her. It was her duty, it was for her country, and it was for her king. And I guess that was something of the British spirit that Australians had at the beginning of World War I. We were British, and she had to go and serve her king. She was absolutely wonderful. I loved her, of course. She was my grandmother. I called her Gar. She was always known in our family as Gar, which is Scottish for grandmother, because part of our heritage is Scottish. And I haven't done this deliberately, but I realise, as Matt pointed out to me, I'm wearing a flag here. It's a Scottish flag as well as the Australian flag. So it's quite ironic. Susie, who was also part of the families and friends of the first AIF, her side of the family called her Nan. She was remarkable because, unlike other veterans of World War I, she came back and spoke about her war experience. She wanted people to know how bloody ghastly war was. And she had literally seen the blood. And she wanted her son, my father John, she wanted him to understand that war was not a glorious thing. War was awful. And so she spoke about her military experience. My grandfather had met her during the war. They were on the island of Lemnos. At the time, her fiancé was there as well. He was in the AIF. He was fighting at Gallipoli. He came back to the island of Lemnos and they met. But she actually met my grandfather there. There wasn't a romance there. The romance came a little bit later because they both served up in England as well. And then in September 1917, they married. During an earlier part of last year, we had some wonderful nurses' presentations here. And if you were here for that, they were really significant. There are some really pertinent books. There was a book which we have which showed all of the photographs that were taken on the island of Lemnos. In July this year, Kath, my wife, and I went to the island of Lemnos. It's always been one of my ambitions. It was a quest, more than an ambition, a quest. I had to visit the island of Lemnos. I wanted to walk and stand where my grandmother had stood during 1915. And with the help of those wonderful material which were provided here, we could do that. So we were there on the island of Lemnos. We hired a car. You really need a car to get around. All the road signs are in Greek and English. That's the only English you will hear or see. Virtually no one speaks English. They virtually have no tourism information on the island, but there is an Anzac Trail. And with the provided material, and there are a few other signs, you can find your way around. So we could stand literally, and there's a small monument where it said the ladies of the 3rd Australian General Hospital actually landed. And there's a wonderful photo of a piper and the group of nurses as they came ashore. We stayed in a hotel in Madras, and people in the hotel really didn't speak English. There are no flyers or information. They didn't tell us. Immediately in front of the hotel, the other side, there's an enormous sort of like a flat plinth with a lot of information about the Australians on the island. And down the road, you can see another marker which we explored and found. That's where the Australian engineers first came ashore. They were the first ones to land to set up arrangements. When the nurses arrived, they found that all their tents, all their medical equipment, all their supplies were on a different ship. That ship didn't get there for 3 weeks. And so my grandmother wrote about treating men who'd come straight from the battlefields of Gallipoli. They were literally lying on the ground, lots of rocks and stones. It was extremely rough. And Kath and I could walk where they were, and the Australian nurses treated the men on the ground. They used their little dixies and little stoves. Many of the women had their own little methylated spirit stoves. They tore up some of their petticoats to make bandages, and they made do until the proper supplies came. Obviously, I'm very proud of my grandmother. I don't mind telling you that when I was on the island of Lemnos with Kath at various places, I would have had streaming tears.
Thank you, Happy.
There are 2 major cemeteries. What I was particularly keen to find were the men who had died while she was there. And so I could see graves of Australians, a few New Zealanders, who had literally died on the island and been buried while my grandmother served. And so for me, it was a connection to put my hand, I put my hand on every one of those graves, because these were men that my grandmother must have known, and she must have had a share in nursing. You are the people who will understand exactly when I tell you that I spoke to every single man on behalf of my grandmother and on behalf of me and our family, to tell them how special they were, and they were not forgotten. And I did that to every Anzac I could find. It was a really emotional experience. I'm getting emotional now, even thinking about it. And you, because you all have, you are descendants of people who served, you understand that 1,000%. So I'm really grateful to you, Paul, that you have done what you've done for Nellie. I mean, she's Gar, but she's Nellie within the family as well. I really appreciate that you chased up her full membership. I appreciate the article you wrote. I have to tell you that I go into schools to give Anzac talks. I'm part of the RSL. My service was so long ago, the dinosaurs roamed, but I'm a member of the RSL. I go into schools. I couldn't do a particular school. There's a lady called Linda Garrett who comes along to Riverstone to our dawn service. This year we had between 8,000 and 10,000 people in Riverstone. She wears a World War I nurse's uniform, and she went into a particular school this year for the first time to give the Anzac address, wearing her uniform and talking about what it was to be a nurse. And I know Paul is chasing me, and I've got to go and sit down.
To send to the Gallipoli, if we can perhaps stand here and look.
Sure.
Look at the camera. look.
The good side or the back side?
Thank you.
I also have that Rising Sun badge. I have many of her badges. My cousin has the medals, but I've got a host of her badges. All right, thank you.
Thank you.